What's up guys, I'm BTC. We just got a patch on the live version of the game. If you remember, we had that PTR update only 5 days ago, and I wasn't expecting them to move it over this fast. That was only 5 days. The patch before it, I believe, was only a week or so on the PTR. So when Jeff Kaplan, just recently, he said that they were planning on making these faster, more frequent changes. I mean, I guess they really are. I was expecting it every 2 or 3 weeks, but this is really fast. Now, I don't exactly expect them to make changes every single week, but this is certainly faster than I expected. Now, I do want to point out that a bunch of the changes that they had on the PTR did not get carried over to what we have on the live version of the game. Some of the nerfs didn't go through, some of the buffs didn't go through, and other changes were modified, so they weren't as good or as bad. So let's just quickly run through that stuff. So first up is Hanzo. This is exactly the same. The storm arrow damage was reduced from 70 down to 60. For Mccree, he got a bunch of changes. Remember on the PTR, he had 250 health, which was just kind of crazy, right? Like a huge amount of health. And this was meant to make him better at dealing with dive characters. You know, you have a Winston or a Diva that dives onto Mccree, you can now just survive through a lot more of that. But the problem is, if you have a Mccree with that much health, then there's really nothing stopping him from just going frontline. You could have a Reinhardt and a Zarya, you have Mccree run frontline with you, and he just right-clicks all day long, right? So there are some unintended, consequences when you have changes like this. But they ended up not bringing that health buff over. They also did not nerf the primary attack, so they were going to increase the recovery time between his attacks, and they did not change that. The only thing that Mccree did get changed was with his ultimate. So now, when you activate the Deadeye for the second time, when you start attacking with it, it no longer locks your aim. So now you can start moving the camera around, and if there are players on your left or even behind you, if you're fast enough, you could actually hit all of them. Next up is Reaper. He did get the nerf that was on the PTR. The healing amount was reduced on his passive from 40% down to 30%. I think when they originally added this, they took away the soul orbs. I think it was 20%, then they buffed it to 30, then they buffed it to 50, then they nerfed it to 40, and now they nerfed it again down to 30. So who knows how long it's going to be here. They keep changing it around. Really, there's some other problems with the character. Reaper has already dropped off in the pick rates for the upper bracket, right? Like, yes, there was a short amount of time where he was super strong because of the 222, because of Reaper May and the double barrier and that sort of stuff. But Reaper's pick rate has already dropped off in the upper bracket. He's not one of the super strong characters that's being used anymore. He's kind of towards the bottom, actually. I would say he's not exactly at the bottom, but he's towards the bottom. In the lower bracket, Reaper is only middle of the road, really. I mean, he's not super high pick rate. He's just, he gets used, that's for sure. But again, I think one of the issues is that he just doesn't quite have the stuff he needs to be consistently good in the upper bracket, and because of the way the character is made, he tends to be a little stronger than he should be in the lower bracket. And I think what they could do is, first, they need to fix Shadow Step. 2, they can probably leave the passive where it is. I think 30% is fine. Maybe they could even nerf it a little bit more, but if they did that, then they would have to give him something else. Maybe some other ability, maybe if Shadow Step actually gets fixed and is more useful, or maybe they even give him another attack of some kind, right? Like, they could do some things where they could increase the skill ceiling of the character, so that way he's actually more useful in the upper bracket and not such a problem in the lower bracket. Next up is Orisa. She did get a bunch of the nerfs that were on the PTR. However, the damage nerf wasn't as bad. On the live version that we just got, the damage nerf went from 11 down to 10. However, on the PTR, it was 11 down to 9. So, still a nerf, but not as bad as it was on the PTR. Next up is Fortify. This is the same. The cooldown went from 8 to 10 seconds, so pretty substantial nerf to that and to her survivability. And then the last nerf she got was with her halt ability. The snare duration was reduced from 1 down to 0.65, and this is the same that it was on the PTR. It does seem like Blizzard is trying to reduce the slowing effect of a lot of these abilities and just crowd control in general. They're trying to reduce it, give you a little bit better chance to get away. They did the same thing with Mei in the last patch, where they made it so that it slows less and it also wears off a little bit faster. So again, trying to reduce some of that slowing effect in the crowd control. For Sigma, only some of the nerfs went through. He had a nerf on his Gravitic Flux, which can now be interrupted before the targets begin falling, which now gives quite a bit extra time for the enemy team to be able to interrupt it. The impact slow was also reduced from 0.9 to 0.6, and again, this is kind of in line with what we see with Orisa and Mei and them just reducing the slowing stuff. Accretion, the damage was reduced from 60 down to 40. This is a huge nerf, because this now means that you cannot combo the Accretion with the Hyperspheres and just get that quick elimination on 200 hit point targets. You now need to follow up with a third attack of some kind, whether it's more Hyperspheres or if it's quick melee if you happen to be close enough or something, but you cannot just use that 2-hit combo anymore in order to take out the enemy. Now, one of the things that they didn't move through is the nerf to the Hypersphere's range. On the PTR, it was 22 meters, nerfed down to 20 meters, but on the live version of the game, they did not put through that range nerf. So some of the really big nerfs to Sigma did get through, but the Hypersphere nerf, which was, still pretty decent, that's a pretty good range to lose on that did not go through. And then for Baptiste, this was pushed through exactly as it was on the PTR. His primary attack, they increased the recovery time from 0.35 to 0.45, so overall his DPS is going to go down. Now, his individual attacks are still the same, it's just the overtime damage that he has, particularly when attacking big targets or barriers, that sort of stuff. It's definitely going to go down a noticeable amount. And then also they nerfed his healing from 60 down to 50, so both his attack and his heal have been nerfed. It's going to be interesting to see just how frequently Blizzard makes these balance changes, because we had 2 patches with pretty substantial nerfs just in the matter of a couple weeks. Irisa and Sigma have been nerfed substantially. I don't think that double barrier is completely gone. It's still a strong strategy, right? Having double barrier means that your team doesn't take damage as long as those barriers are up, and that's still a very effective thing. Even if the barriers are weaker, just being able to absorb an extra, several hundred or 1,000 damage or whatever, right? That is a lot of damage that your team just isn't taking. So that's still going to be effective. However, with all of these nerfs, it does mean that other comps like Reinhardt and Zarya can come back, Dive can come back. Now that Mccree doesn't have that extra health, he's still going to be just as vulnerable to Dive as he was before. But I think one of the major problems is that Blizzard is simply choosing to ignore some of the issues with Sigma, in that he's too good at everything. And really, they're just going to have to keep nerfing him again and again and into the ground before it ever balances out. I mean, he has almost everything. The only thing he's really missing is mobility. He's got a barrier, he's got a defense matrix, he's got bonus health, he's got a minor self-heal, he's got crowd control, he's got high damage. I mean, he's got all this different stuff, right? He's got things that multiple characters should have, and instead it's all on one character. Also, keep an eye out for the developer update, which is probably going to happen either tomorrow or Thursday. So what do you guys think about these new revised changes? I think it's actually pretty good that Blizzard is actually willing to make changes from the PTR, because what we used to have before was they would put something on the PTR, they would ignore all the feedback, and then they would just push it through to the live server anyways, regardless of what problems it would cause, regardless of if it was too strong or too weak or whatever. I mean, remember what they did with Bastion's Ironclad when they first added it? It was so unbelievably powerful. You could get it up to I think it was 80% or 85% or something like that. It was actually impossible to get an elimination on a Bastion who was nano boosted. You could not do enough damage. He could survive 2 Diva ultimates at the same time. That's how strong it was. And I made a video about it. I know a lot of other people were talking about it. Blizzard just didn't care. And they're just like, whatever, we're just gonna push it through to the live version anyway. And they've done that with other stuff too. Maybe not to that same level of, you know, oh my god, what are you doing? But they've certainly done that with other changes too, right? You know, I think Reaper getting 50% lifesteal was another good example too. But it's good that they're now taking feedback and they're looking and say, okay, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. I wonder if they're actually doing some of that on purpose, where they're putting things on the PTR going, you know what, let's just see what we get for feedback, right? Like let's see if we can sneak this in. Like, let's see if people want this sort of thing. And then, you know, when everybody's like, no, that's not a good idea, then like, okay, well, maybe we can't do that. But anyways, so what do you guys think about these changes and about the new rapid system that Blizzard is using? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell to get notified. You can get some cool gear, join my Discord server, or follow me on social media with the links down in the description below. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters, and remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.